Mr. T versus Roddy Piper. Let's go into that. That is the main event of the first part of the show at the Nassau Coliseum. It's a boxing match which lasts just over 13 minutes and goes over 3 rounds. So it gets into the 4th round, and then Roddy Piper gets disqualified for slamming Mr. T. Matt, you didn't seem to enjoy it very much.
Just as a start, for even having to watch that was, what the hell was that? No, I've seen some shitty wrestling before, and but that really takes the piss.
Well, it takes the piss because you've seen shitty wrestling before, but you accept that because you're watching wrestling. You don't expect to see shitty boxing as well.
Yes, and that's an absolute fair point. And as a fan of combat sports, do you know what? Again, I've seen shitty fights. I've seen shitty boxing fights. But what was that about? Okay, I know I've talked about it slightly in the past as well, sort of, Mr. T and his reputation. And do you know what? I mean, I was kind of expecting it to almost be a squash. I was expecting Mr. T to probably knock him on his ass I was probably thinking within the first round. That probably would have been the best thing if they really want to get the most out of him and make Mr. T look awesome, because they seem to have such a hard-on for him during this period of WWE. But the fact that Roddy Piper, who, all right, okay, he looks like a relatively big guy, I suppose, but the fact that Roddy Piper put Mr. T on his ass, I almost stopped watching the show in a protest to that. I was like, yeah, you can fuck off. I was like, nah, I'm not having that. That was the stupidest thing. Why would they do that? Mr. T's meant to be Mr. T, it's how you kick anybody.
I can't believe you love Mr. T this much.
Oh, God. Roddy Piper put him on his ass. You've got to be kidding me. So that was embarrassing. The finish, oh, my God. Come on. I mean, it's pay-per-view. It's, okay, WrestleMania is still in its infancy, but it's WrestleMania. It's a big show. And they have the goal to end the damn thing in not only a disqualification, but a shit disqualification as well. He went for just this really crap-looking slam, and I'm not sure I'm telling you just how I feel about this, but it was just awful. Waste of time. Never watch this match this fight in your life, because it sucked.
I'm a little bit disappointed because I thought you might I thought you might give us both barrels, but you did mince your words a little bit there, Matt. So it's a bit disappointing. Stephen, what did you think?
Just a very quick quote from the Observer. Dave, I don't know where to start. Simply, this was the single biggest travesty I've ever seen perpetrated in pro wrestling. I mean, wow. A couple of quick points. Joan Rivers was another celebrity who was ring announcing this. She got a nice reaction from the crowd. The judges were a basketball player, a showbiz bloke called Cab, and an actual legal judge, like a law judge. How did that get sanctioned? And if I were Piper, I definitely would have made a complaint. There was also some other celebrity, a Burger King person, who was involved in a controversy about, basically, it's this thing about spotting this guy Herb, and someone spotted Herb at a restaurant and believed they won the prize, but because he was under 16, someone else claimed it. It was a big lawsuit, and I think that went away. That went away with this promotion of Herb, basically. Meltzer gave this -5 stars, so I was I had very low expectations for this going in. But I thought round one just about stayed on the side of being passable, I thought. But then, unfortunately, as tends to be the case, they both gassed and they were moving around and stuff, but they just couldn't keep this going. And I thought round two was not quite passable, but was just about watchable, I suppose. And the crowd chanting for Roddy was, clearly he was about to turn babyface at this point. And the crowd was really still hot between rounds 1 and 2. But then, unfortunately, as soon as it was T's turn to get on top in the third round, the whole thing took a turn. He was blown out of his arse and didn't have any energy for this comeback. The shot that put Piper down for the second time and made him bump into the ringside floor, there was no shot there. It missed by about a light year. I was impressed by Roddy Piper throwing the stool because it hit Mr. T squarely in his balls. That was an excellent aim. And round 2 was just an absolute embarrassment. As you said, Matt, the finish was atrocious. I understand why they didn't want to beat Piper clean. But yeah, this was, I think if they both done some training for this and had a bit of an engine, I think they could have made this okay because the crowd were into it. But what they presented was one of the worst things in the history of WrestleMania.
Yeah, no, I think I'd have to agree, although I am very impressed by the extent to which you've analysed that match there, Stephen, because that meant you definitely had more energy than I did for this. That was very, very impressive. I guess they just thought, look, it's Mr. T. What's he famous for? Rocky 3. They're still in Rocky 3 mode. That's the whole thing. So that's the only reason they've had Mr. T previously with Hogan. Obviously, Hogan and Mr. T both in Rocky 3. And they're just still there. I think they're just still there. The thing about Piper, he never lost clean. Like, he just never did. Like, very, very rarely at this point in his career did he ever lose clean. He never lost clean to Hogan during this period of his career. He wouldn't do it, basically. And I think I think that just continued on. He just didn't do that. It was just his kind of his thing. And I think, yeah, more power to him. I'm the older I get, the more I quite admire the politicking of people to do certain things, because I feel like I think when you see people not doing it, you get what AEW is right now, and that is why I think I admire it more and more. So yeah, he never did it, so it's not a surprise that he didn't lose to Mr. T. And I seem to remember that Piper took this whole thing as a little bit of a shoot anyway. Certainly in the future, he would talk about how he basically was angry that he even had to sell for Mr. T and all this stuff, because Mr. T was just an actor, not a fighter of any kind. Not that Piper was really a fighter of any kind either, was he?
Roddy's not a pretend wrestler, is he? Come on.
But yeah, yes, it is really terrible. It's the main event of the New York portion of the show, and they had to make it at least 3 rounds because the rest of the matches on the first portion of the show last a grand total of 12 minutes. So they had to make it last a little bit of time. Just absolutely awful. I felt bad for Joe Frazier for having to be witness to it, quite frankly.
An absolute turd. One of many on this show.
Is Roddy Piper known for being, like a tough guy?
In the storyline, I talked about him doing golden gloves, like amateur boxing, but whether he did that, I don't know. I read his book about 20 years ago, and the thing I remember the most about it is that he had some sort of sexually transmitted infection, like a wart or something, and he burst it himself on his genitals, obviously, rather than he's on his arm, and he used some sort of dart device to burst said wart, and that's the thing that I remember the most about that book. So
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess ultimately he himself, though, portrayed the idea of him being a hard man, because that's what he did. It's the game, isn't it, really?